We talk a lot about data visualizations, but frankly, it was easier to visualize data when computers were as big as rooms instead of small enough to fit in our pockets. Now all we talk about is our digital footprints, something as nebulous and fuzzy as attitudes and feelings. But once upon a time, data had substance. You could touch it and feel it. Even better, you could play with it, even if you had no idea what data was. That was the beauty of punched cards, those ubiquitous dollar-sized rectangles of stiff paper from my childhood. For nearly 100 years, starting in the late 1800s, punched cards were the primary medium for data entry, data storage, and computer processing. They didn't look as cool as an iPhone, but they represented state-of-the-art technology. And they gave multiple generations of crafty Americans the raw material to create data-inspired decor. In the 1960s, families gathered around their console TV sets, which still primarily featured black and white programming, to make holiday wreaths from rolled-up punch cards. You'd bend the edges of one end of the card and then staple multiple rows of cards to a circular piece of cardboard. The final touch, and this was the piece de resistance, was to spray paint the wreaths. Silver or gold were the most popular colors. Don't laugh and stop rolling your eyes. There were a lot of used punch cards laying around. Someone had to do something with them, and making a wreath was as good an option as any, I guess. You can thank Herman Hollerith, an American statistician who worked for the U.S. Census. Hollerith developed a machine based on punch cards to tabulate statistics from millions of pieces of data. He had a simple explanation. He said the records must be in a shape that a machine couldn't read them. And guess what he came up with? Which is most readily done by punching holes in cards. Voila! Punch cards helped the U.S. government complete the 1980 census in only 1 year. Imagine that. But Hollerith went on to do even bigger and better things, all because of his success with punch cards. He founded one of the companies that later merged and became IBM. IBM was the king of punch cards. By 1937, the company had 32 presses at work in Endicott, New York, printing, cutting, and stacking as many as 10 million punch cards every day. Visualize that data. Of course, all good things come to an end. By the mid-1970s, most large-scale data processing operations abandoned punch cards in favor of floppy disks, or hard disks, or magnetic tapes. And by the mid-1990s, the shift was essentially complete, with very few businesses still using cards for anything other than scrap paper. Here's what I think happened next. As the supply of punch cards dried up, we had less scrap paper, and with nothing to write on, we started taking notes on our computers. Eventually, we were jotting away on our phones and tablets with feverish intensity, growing our digital footprints and creating digital exhaust. Big data was born. What can I say? It's interesting, but it's nowhere near as interesting as a punch card wreath.